Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, Patrick Donoghue here, news editor with the Irish Farmers Journal. This week we look in detail at the recent evolution of fertiliser prices. Agribusiness editor Eoin Lowry and farm finance specialist Peter Hynes discuss how much cheaper various types of fertiliser have become and how farmers should plan their purchases for the season ahead.
Farmers are starting to think about purchasing the first fertiliser prices of the year, and the good news is that prices are down. Owen, how much are we expecting them to be down?
Well, Peter, it is good news, I suppose, and the back of falling oil prices. I think it seems to be coming true that fertiliser prices have come back. We've seen urea now back about 35 to 40 euros a tonne on prices of this time last year, and can prices coming back about 20-25 euros a tonne. So that's very positive. On the other side with the NPKs, it's probably early days yet, but there hasn't been any movement on the prices of those over this time last year, but I don't see any upward movement in it, but they haven't come back in price.
So looking at prices, farmers are looking to buy urea at 350 to 360 euro a tonne is what I'm hearing out there. Also for can, closer to 290 euros per tonne, which is back on last year.
Yeah, that's back on last year, and this is all driven on the fall in the oil price that we've read and seen so much about, particularly in the past 6 months. We are now moving into the peak fertiliser season, where, let's not forget, about 3/4 of business is going to be done in the next 2 to 3 months, and nearly half of the fertiliser is already purchased in Europe and is in stores waiting to be sent out to farms. So it's unlikely that we'll see any further downward pressure on can prices. I would suggest that where we are is where we are now, but I think in the summer months, maybe from May onwards, we could see a correction in those nitrogen prices.
On urea, it could actually be scarce, because if farmers look at the economics of it, urea per unit nitrogen is actually 38% cheaper than can unit nitrogen at the moment. So if farmers want to save costs, they should be looking to urea. The weather is wet out there, when they do get a chance to spread, but they will get more value, and I think that's important for farmers. They should be looking to secure urea, particularly for the first couple of months of the year into February and March to spread.
Yeah, I think, Peter, you're right. It's a fundamental change this year, where urea has normally traded about 10% of a discount to can, but this year at a discount of 33%, 38%, it's a huge discount, and that's going to switch, as particularly in a year of lower dairy and grain prices. They're going to look and see if they can save a little bit here and there by using urea. I think the market will continue to see a can market here. I can't see very many farmers switching. It's been traditional down through the years, even though recent research has reported in the Farmers Journal this week, will show that urea is as effective in certain situations as can on fields for crops.
I think some of the smart farmers will stick to urea a little bit longer. It is so much cheaper. The problem, what I see, is a lot of the amounts have been brought in now, so it could actually, if a lot of farmers decide to use urea, it could get a little bit scarce. So farmers who are thinking of spreading, when the land does dry out, they should be getting it into the yard now, getting ready, and also doing deals on price, but also on credit as well, probably get a few months credit.
Yeah, and I think this is a unique year. Like, we have just come out of one of the wettest winters. Sales of fertiliser to date, I've been told, are 75% back on this time last year in Ireland, and in the UK it's 25% back. Now what effect that has is that will cause a bottleneck, or could cause a bottleneck in March if buying doesn't start to happen and fertiliser starts to move onto the farm. So I suppose that'll be driven by weather first of all, but also a little bit of confidence in the market that the price has reached, I suppose, a floor in the short term. I think the medium to longer term is going to be much more difficult to see where the price will be for nitrogen.
Let's talk about P&K now. You've said that they're going to be similar to last year. One of the big things, potash or DAP on phosphorus on the international markets, actually it's actually cheaper than it is this time last year, but the swing in sterling has actually made it more expensive. So currency has had a big impact.
Yeah, I suppose, Peter, what we really have to stand back from this, and this is about a global market for potash and DAP. Yes, these two commodities are traded, as you rightly say, in dollars, and when you convert the dollar price, which has reduced significantly over the last 12 months, when you convert that into euros, the price has actually risen in euro terms. But the potash industry is quite unique in that there's very small amount of suppliers around the world who have the ability to curtail production so that they can manage the margins that they make, the profits that they make, and keep that price up there. And that's what they're doing. We saw only last week one of the largest American producers completely shut down one of its mines to curtail about 2 million tonnes of production out of the system, or to take that out of the system. And that will have a very huge shortfall effect on the market. The market is back. Remember that commodities have fallen. Dairy commodities are back 50%. Grain commodities are back about 35-40%. And it's not about what we produce here, but it's what is produced in Latin America and in the US. And these countries, such as Brazil, where the real has collapsed against the dollar, has caused the price of fertiliser in these countries to dramatically increase. So they're cutting back their fertiliser usage, and that's having the knock-on effect of reducing the demand for potash. What did the potash producers do is they cut back on production, and that's what we're seeing. I think they can only do that for so long, but they're now saying that at the current international potash prices, it is now more effective or cost effective for them to curtail production than to produce at the lower prices.
So looking overall in summary, for farmers who are looking to go out and buy fertiliser, one, they should be buying urea for nitrogen. They should be getting to source it. The price at the moment, 350 to 360 euros per tonne is what they can get. Maybe a little bit cheaper if they're buying large amounts in purchasing groups. Can is around 290 euros a tonne, with the P's and K's 18612 and the 27s are around about that 400 euro a tonne mark, with potentially a slight bit of pressure coming on can prices in the next 2 months, but most guys will be looking at urea.
Yeah, I agree. I really think, look, we're talking about urea for the next few weeks. I think it'll move into a can market then. There will be can being used by certain farmers. I think the prices for can that are out there at the moment would be where the market's at. I can't see any downward change happening in the short term on nitrogen prices. And like I said, the NPK prices, I'd say, are stable for the next 3 to 4 months as well.
Thanks very much, Eoin. I know you have an in-depth analysis of fertiliser prices across the world in the journal this week. I'll also have prices in the inside back page and Farm Finance, so farmers will be much better informed when they read the Farmers Journal.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Our Northern Ireland correspondent Peter McCann was at the Young Farmers Club of Ulster's conference at the weekend, and he met Jonathan Birnie, Dunbia's head of agriculture, for an update on what factories expect from beef farmers.
Jonathan, you were talking in your presentation there about the way farmers are paid for their animals and the carcasses, and changing, going away from the Europe scale towards a saleable meat, and how they need to get prepared for that. Can you just describe that to me and what you were talking about with that?
At the minute, there's no better system than the Europe in place, and it gives a broad guide to meat yield. But meat yield, while it is related to overall value, is only partially related to that value, because certain proportions of the carcass and portions of the carcass are worth much more than others. Therefore, there can be a lot of variation between two apparently identical carcasses, and the industry is going to have to address this over the next few years. There's a lot of stuff in development, tools looking at this type of thing and how we're going to move forward, and it is going to come at some point or other. I'm not putting an exact timescale on it, but those farmers and those breeders that prepare for that now are obviously going to be hugely advantaged, because they will be much further down the road than people who ignore this likelihood.
As far as getting that correct carcass, speaking on today's scale, farmers are going to be behind the times whenever it does change or you bring it in.
I think part of the problem with Europe scale is that it doesn't sometimes reflect totally where the value comes in. If you look at what customers are buying, they're buying minced products, convenience products, and they're buying steaks predominantly. And therefore any sort of logical look at that would suggest that any way in which we can increase the number of steaks, whether that's by lengthening the animal or developing different cuts, will actually provide a financial advantage in the long term. So that's my problem with Europe, is that it doesn't actually show the farmer that if he lengthens the animal, he gets additional value. Therefore, that's why it has to change.
For a farmer to change now, obviously it's a 9-month gestation period, at least 2 years to get finished. So we're talking 3 years in line. So you're saying longer animals at later carcass weights.
Yeah, I think if we're aiming at animals that finished quickly and efficiently to a 330, 340 kilo carcass weight and were longer, that's going to address a lot of the issues. I mean, farming is under financial pressure, therefore we must finish animals quickly and must generate more value from the carcass as well. Therefore, I'm not advocating any one particular breed. There's a lot of inbreed and within breed variation. Therefore, a farmer should be looking at something which is going to make a difference 4 or 5 years down the line, because we can't pay for it at the minute anyway, but eventually it will be paid for, and therefore we are talking long term. We're talking 5 years here. year, but let's aim for 5 years, let's aim for 10 years.
One other thing, beef side registrations up 8% last year in the north, same story in the south. A lot of cattle coming forward, and you were talking about markets, opening new markets. Where are we heading with that?
In one sense, it's a difficult one to answer because it takes so long to open important markets. I mean, we've been talking about getting direct access to China for quite some time. We think that's a lot closer, but that's taken a really long period of years to get there. So nothing tends to move quick in international markets. When we look at the other markets, you know, the highest paying market for us is the UK market. Is there room to sell beef there? Yes, there is room, and there's room to sell those high value cuts. I suppose the challenge comes in actually them selling effectively the cuts are probably less wanted, whether that's fifth quarter or whether it's more roasting cuts, and that's where the money is made or lost as we carry our business. So we have to find these new markets, but it does take time, and it is coming, but it's very slow.
Jonathan Birnie, thanks very much for your time.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
On Monday, dairy specialist with the Farmers Journal, Aidan Brennan, took part in the first series of spring walks organised by Teagasc. Advisor Grainne Hurley gave him some tips on grazing and nitrogen use after this unusually warm winter.
Grainne, we're on the farm today of Peter Hynes in Aherla, just outside Bandon. Peter's one of the farmers that was selected for the Teagasc Spring Dairy Grass Walks. Grainne, do you mind just going through what was on show today and what are the key points for farmers this spring?
Yeah, so today we were just focusing on spring walks. We're focusing really, two key messages really was trying to get make sure to ensure that farmers get their cows out to grass as soon as possible. And our second main point was that we need to get nitrogen out in paddocks as soon as possible as well. I suppose the main point in terms of getting cows out, there's an ocean of grass out there, there's lots and lots of grass out there.
How much more grass is there this year versus last year, Grainne? Have you any indication of?
For example, Peter Hynes now, he opened with a farm cover today about 913, a few weeks ago. I think this time last year he'd been down around probably 600 cover, So there's quite substantial amount of grass in farms,
That's it's substantially more. I mean, these were the paddock that we were on there this morning. The first paddock there was a cover of about 2,000 on it. Have you seen many high covers, and are those covers dying back, or what are the issues around those high covers?
Yes. Walking farms the last fortnight I have seen a lot of heavy covers like that. And what's happening is that, fair enough, up to kind of about maybe 2-3 weeks ago, these covers were holding their quality quite well, but they are starting to deteriorate. There's a lot of die back in these covers, So especially specifically paddocks that are like Peter Hynes cover this morning, it was a reseed from last year. So it is growing aggressively, but you can see that at the moment now it is dying back a fair bit So it's quite important, even with the heavy covers, that we need to get nitrogen out in them at the moment. Even guys might be slow in putting nitrogen out in heavy covers, but the fact that they're dying back so quickly, they do need some nitrogen because they're very hungry paddocks.
But Grainne, not just heavy covers, people are slow to put nitrogen on. Most people don't, they say they won't spread nitrogen until late February, early March. I mean, we heard today on the farm that you should spreading nitrogen now. What's your feeling on that?
Yes.
What's the reason behind it?
Yes, we need to get nitrogen out straight away. I suppose the key thing we're looking at Peter's farm today, is that he's going to finish his first rotation on the 4th of April. So he's going to target because he's going to try and graze as many times as he can in each paddock. For him to have enough grazings in his next rotation, he needs to get nitrogen out now. If he doesn't get nitrogen out, he won't have enough grass into April and May. So it is key to get nitrogen out directly at the moment. Our targets would be to get 70 units of nitrogen out by the 1st of April. You want to get 30 units out now, and then 40 units out in April. Ground conditions, I mean, they are difficult at the moment, but soil temperatures are high. They're well up to 7, 8, 9 degrees, so there's no issue with nitrogen. If you can get your nitrogen out and you 48 hours of no heavy rainfall, your nitrogen's still in the ground, there's going to be no losses So guys should not be afraid to get nitrogen out.
Yeah, we heard today that the response rates to nitrogen were something like 10 kilos of grass for every kilo of nitrogen sprayed. So I mean, on a cost basis, it's probably 5 to 1 in terms of the cost versus benefit.
Yes, I mean, if you can displace costly feeds like silage and concentrate for cheaper feed like by grass by getting your nitrogen out, I mean that's a huge cost saving, especially in a year like this year where we're looking into lower milk prices. And
let's face it, every grass that's grown in spring will be eaten. There's always a deficit in terms of demand versus supply. So that's it's a readily achievable figure, I suppose.
Yes. I mean, again, and the key message today was to use our spring rotation planner so that we utilise as much grass in the spring. So we're looking at, for example, in Peter's farm today, is that we're going to target to get cows out in grass on the 1st of February. We're going to graze 100% of the farm then by the 4th of April. And the key target's getting 30% of his farm grazed by the 1st of March and 2/3 of his farm grazed by mid-April. If he follows the spring rotation planner on a weekly basis while grass measuring, he's going to utilise 100% and he's not going to run out of grass or he's not going to have a surplus grass by the 4th of April, setting up his farm again for his second and third rotations, making sure he's got high quality going to those grazing rotations.
So, Grainne, like, it's all well and good. We're here in Cork, the home of dairy farming. I mean, there's people listening in from Cavan and Monaghan and Tyrone and Mayo and places like that. We're going to say, okay, we can't do this in my farm. I mean, what are the practices they can adopt that will help them to improve their utilisation of grass?
Yeah, Aidan, I mean, I worked for a good number of years down in heavy soils down in County Kerry, and I mean, there's a lot of guys down there who will target to get cows out on the 1st of April. I mean, the main issues are is that, like, not all your farm is going to be dry. You have to be flexible and point your dry paddocks, like, no. So be flexible, pick your dry paddocks. Then your second option then are to use the grazing management tools. I mean, you use on-off grazing, so get your cows out for 3 hours onto your paddocks, get them back off again for 3 hours, and house them then, like, no, with little or no silage. Again, use techniques like plenty access points, and Pat Dillon went through this at the farm walk today, having 2 or 3 access points into paddock. Use your 12-hour strip wires, your back grazing, like, no, so cows are not going back over near they've grazed. You're minimising damage that way, and also using strip wires down along the side of fences. So you've got cow paths and you're walking the cows down to the paddocks. So using those type of tools and being flexible to the type of paddocks that you can graze. So during the wet weather, like Peter Hynes would have said today, that during the wet weather he targets the paddocks that he's plenty access points, and then during the dry periods during the spring he'll target the fields that had the heavy grass cover. So you have to be flexible in where you graze, but you also have to be flexible in the management tools that you use to graze these paddocks.
Excellent, very good. Thanks, Grainne, for your time. And I suppose just to recap, this is the first walk of about 20 grass walks that Teagasc are holding. So they're right across the country, and there's ads taken out in the Farmers Journal with the list of the walks on them. So thanks, Grainne, thanks for your time.
No problem.
The Irish Farmers Journal weekly podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Meanwhile, news journalist Odile Evans attended the Lismullin Agricultural Seminar. There she met Dorene Mallon, a marketing expert who shared her thoughts on how to find out what consumers want.
Dorene, can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Generally, on a weekly basis, I'm out meeting customers across Europe. So it's generally in France, Spain or the UK. I'm trying to introduce Irish beef to them, and I'm talking to them about what we do and where we come from, our values and our products and all the farmers we work with. And the objective is obviously to strike a deal.
And you said in your presentation that you can get a phone call that would mean you've lost 2, 3, 5 million euros worth of business just at the end of a phone call. How do you deal with that?
It's a tough time of year. There's a lot of competition in Europe, and yes, potentially a retailer or a food service company can ring you up in January and say, unless you can do this for 40 cents a kilo cheaper or that price, we're going to move our product. The reaction to that is obviously to see if you can do it for that price, but for such a high price drop it's generally not viable. I will go over and meet them, so I'll head over and meet them whatever country they're based in and discuss options with them. I try to compare and make sure that we're comparing like for like, because often they try and think that they're getting a better product, and we try and find a solution to see if there's anything else we can do, because it's important to fight for the business and not lose so much money very quickly. However, at the end of the day, either he wants to do business at that price, and if you can't do it, you can't do it, and there's only so much you can drop the price by.
So, because you're dealing in a commodity-based market, you decided to create your own brand. Can you just tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, I got quite frustrated, as this happens every January, that I get phone calls from large retailers telling me that they want to drop price and move to a different supplier. So I thought there has to be more. We have to be able to create an emotional connection with our products, and we have to be able to create a brand and connect with the consumer. And I thought there has to be some way that we can connect with the consumer and sell them our story, as opposed to them buying a supermarket private label product. Doesn't the consumer want to know more about their food and where it's coming from, and create an attachment that other big companies around Ireland have done, not on the food, maybe on a drinks level or on a beer level, and they've managed to create a connection with the consumer, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying.
Yeah. So it's similar to, as you were saying, the concept of Guinness, Kerrygold, and even the Swiss branding is creating that emotional connection.
Yeah, I think Ireland's a very small country. We're full of a lot of hard-working farmers. I think there's a lot of people out there trying to do the exact same thing, and I don't understand why we don't all join together as a platform and use Ireland as a as a platform to grow business from. I think everybody's very segmented. We're doing everything in a fragmented way, and I don't know why there's not more collaboration and working together and building a brand Inc., a brand Ireland, because if you get a watch and it's from Switzerland, or you get a penknife, it has to be from Switzerland, and I don't understand why, if you buy beef, or buy the Irish one, or if somebody came home not with Kerrygoat butter, you'd be a bit disappointed, but why didn't you buy the Kerrygoat butter? And that's why I don't understand, why can't we just do more of that? And I understand that takes 20 years, but I think if we started now, in 20 years we look back and say, I'm really happy we did that.
And does something like the Board Be a quality marker, or the Board, the Origin Green programme, do they have a part to play in this?
Yeah, Board B are doing a fantastic job, and definitely the quality assurance scheme, and once again on the Origin Green, I think they're doing an amazing inroads, and most recently the Origin Green, and I think it all will stand us, and I think that's part of it. I think there's many factors part of it, building a brand, and definitely what they're doing is helping.
And do you think Origin Green will become Kerrygold, that brand in the future in markets in other countries?
I think the Origin Green will definitely stand from a sustainability point of view, but I think other countries maybe, I think we'll be the pioneers in it, but I think in time other countries will be able to do the same from a sustainability, producing more efficiently point of view. They can follow in the footsteps, while I think it's hard for another country to replicate the Kerrygold story, because it's quite unique to Ireland and it's something special that we do. While the Origin Green, it's unique to Ireland at the moment and we're pioneering the way, but maybe other countries can do it in time.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
We're just a few weeks away from the first Agri-Careers Fair organised by the Irish Farmers Journal and Open Air on 3rd of March. Careers editor Mary Phelan knows all about the plans for the event, and she answered questions from our consumer editor Ciara Leahy.
The Agri-Careers Fair will be a one-stop shop for a job in agriculture, as we're bringing agri-employers together under the one roof so they can meet people, really the attendees on the day, who are interested in working for their companies. So they will have real-life jobs on the day that they want to fill, and they're really, really interested in meeting people who have maybe the experience, the qualifications, but most importantly the passion to work in the industry. And it takes place in the RDS on the 3rd of March, and there's a lot more really than just a jobs expo going on the day. We're also going to have a main stage where there will be speakers talking all day. There's a section, for example, called See the World, where people who travel quite a lot as part of their job in the industry will be talking, and then we will also have quite high profile speakers as well. So the Wolf brothers are one example of this. These are 5 brothers who all work in the agri industry, ranging from the eldest Jim Wolf, who is CEO of Dairygold, to the youngest David Wolf, who's on the home farm farming.
Okay, Mary, that sounds great in regards to the speakers. And tell me, do you have exhibitors on board as well?
We certainly do. So I would advise people who are interested in coming to keep an eye on the website www.agricareers.ie, as we are updating that daily with the names of the companies that are coming along on the day. So at the moment, things are quite strong in the meat processing sector. So we have ABP, Keypack, Dunbia, Irish Country Meats. They're all going to be there on the day with lots of jobs. I mean, really, there's a skills shortage in the meat processing sector at the moment, so they'll be really, really keen to meet people. And then some of the other companies we have on board include Dairygold and Ornua from the dairy processing sector. And then also we have InnoPharma Labs, we have the Irish Field, we have the Farmers Journal, and we have some educational providers as well, such as IT Tralee. And InnoPharma Labs is actually another education provider. They have solutions for both the education side of things and for the technology industry. There's kind of very much 2 strands to that business. So I think that's quite an interesting one, because they're running courses that are very relevant to the industry, but a lot of people mightn't have heard of them. So they're quite keen to get their name out there. So really, it's not just about jobs. I mean, in terms of the educational providers, if you're filling out a CAO form, or there's plenty of time to change your mind on the CAO, you might still want a bit of advice about what course to put down. Certainly there will be people there that will be very relevant for you to meet. And there's also a careers advice hub where our HR manager here in the journal will be giving giving lots of advice about CVs and cover letters on the day. And just in terms of the educational providers, if you're interested in getting into the industry but you think maybe you might need to upskill or do another course, you can find out information as well on the day.
But what about other people? Do you have to be qualified? Do you have to have experience in the area? Who, I suppose, essentially should be attending?
I guess, given the name of the fair, Agri Careers, people might assume that you have to have a qualification in ag science, or that you have to have farming experience, or that really you have to just be interested in working in the strict farming or food side of the sector. But the thing about agri companies is that they need HR managers, they need marketeers, they need accountants, they need IT specialists. And when I'm on the phone to all of them, a lot of the roles are very much spread out right across the business. So we're really trying to get the message out there that if you're an accountant maybe living in Dublin, or a HR manager living in Dublin, but you want to move down the country, of course you need a job down the country. And really at the Agri Careers Fair you might be very, very surprised by the opportunities that are presented, because when I'm on the phones to these companies, they are talking as much about the non-ag positions they have to fill as well as the more strictly agricultural or food positions.
Okay, that's very interesting, because I suppose there's so much in the media these days about living in Dublin and the big cities, the job opportunities in Dublin, Cork, Galway. But I mean, there really are job opportunities across the country. And I suppose another thing is, with the price of houses rising in Dublin at the moment, there's probably never a more apt time to looking, I suppose, to moving home or moving to more rural areas.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, house prices, of course, are always been mentioned in the media, and this really might be the incentive for a lot of people who are working in Dublin but want to get out because they simply can't afford to buy a house there. I mean, the cost of an average house in Dublin city or county at the moment is €332,000. That's for a 3-bed semi-detached, and this is according to the Average House Index, which was compiled by Real Estate Alliance. Whereas nationally, the average price of the same house is €188,370, and even in some counties across the country it's much lower than that. For example, in Carlow, the average price of that house is €142,000, whereas in Westmeath it's €130,000, in Galway it's €80,000. So of course, I mean, it really makes huge economic sense that if you can be doing your job in Galway instead of in Dublin, you are set to save a lot of money.
Okay, so Mary, that sounds excellent. And I suppose you know yourself, when you're looking for a job, you can spend hours and hours, days, weeks trawling the internet trying to find a position that really suits your skill set. And I suppose you can get so much work and research done just by attending this fair, talking to the relevant people face to face rather than just over email. So I suppose that it really is a great opportunity for anybody interested in working in the ag sector.
Yes, exactly. And we launched the fair officially last week with our partners Open Air, who we are delighted to have on board. And really, they have a very vested interest in an event like this because their priority over the next few years is rolling out broadband right across the country. Mm-hmm. And they really see the importance of that for an industry such as ours, because they are ensuring that rural businesses have access to high-speed internet, and those rural businesses are supporting jobs, and we're all about jobs at the fair. So we're really, really delighted to have them on board. They're a great fit.
Excellent. So you can read more about that in this week's Irish Country Living.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Finally, Irish Country Living's health page has plenty of information and advice for people suffering from tinnitus, this annoying buzzing in your ears. Health correspondent Margaret Hawkins tells us more.
It's one of those conditions that affects a huge number of people in Ireland. 45,000 actually, so you probably know someone who has experienced it, or you may even have it yourself. Well, in the article I find out about the causes of it, which could be anything from ageing, loud noise exposure, illness, injury or infection. And there's lots of information in the article too about where you can get help if you need it. Did you know, for instance, that there is a support organisation for those with tinnitus in Ireland, and that what's called tinnitus retraining therapy is now available at centres around the country? One of my favourite parts of being a health writer is talking to people with the illnesses or conditions that feature on the health page, and this week is no exception. The person I talked to is a man named Roy Hunt, and he's from County Roscommon and had to give up his job as a truck driver after an accident caused him to develop tinnitus. He talks in what I think is a really inspiring way about how he's learned to cope with it, and he provides tips as well on what you can do if you have it. So you can read more of his story and learn more about tinnitus in this week's Irish Country Living. I hope you find it helpful and interesting.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.